Okay, you are here today for a bed turning. And the number one question is, what is a bed turning? So, in the past, a quilter would use a bed turning as a social event, and she would invite her friends over. She would serve refreshments, maybe cookies and tea, and she would show off her quilts. So before the guest arrives, she would spread her quilts out on a bed like this, and they would gather around as she described each one. This way they could see really up close and personal what a good seamstress she was. It was a big part of a woman's acknowledgement in her family and her community of how good a hand stitcher she was. So our bed turning this year, we have a theme, and it's Applique. So all the quilts that you see from our members and some of the quilters in the local area, all about applique. So we're going to start off today with Grandmother's Flower Garden, a wonderful traditional pattern. In 1999, Joanne Adams made a trip to Oklahoma. She stopped at an antique store and purchased 42 flower blocks without the outer green flower for $8. She added the green round, appliqued them to a 20-inch white block, then assembled into the top. She drew quilting lines, basted it together, and started to hand quilt. Then it lay on her couch for 1 year until the quilting was done. Lovely. I think she got a good bargain. And if you don't know, Joanne is one of our beloved, longtime antique quilters. I just have to show you, I was invited over to her house, and this was on her wall. She's just so cute. She's so cute. She looks the same today. Just a cute little photo. Okay, I confess, I am a quilter, and I do love applique. So a number of these in this display are mine. This is Rose Sampler. I fell in love with these gorgeous applique blocks from a pattern book called Rose Sampler Supreme. There are 20 different rose patterns in the book, and I chose my favorite 12. This quilt won Best of Show at Alameda County Fair in 2009, and it's all hand quilted. From the top left, Rose of Sharon coming across, Rose and Tulips, two-door rose. Next row, Ring Around the Roses, Prairie Rose, and Wild Roses. This is Flower Basket Parade. Virginia Minette made this quilt. She has been a quilter for 45 years and lives in Tracy. She learned to quilt from classes taught at a community college, and this is one of her first quilts. The pattern is from a Stitch and Sew magazine back in 1974. It is hand appliqued, hand embroidered, hand quilted, using the quilt as you go technique. That's where a block is completed with the applique, and then it has a backing and the batting, and then that is added to another block, and then it's quilted. So the quilt blocks are individually completed, and then they're sewn together. This has been exhibited in Orange County Fair and several quilt shows. Special. This is Floral Applique, submitted by Judy Mullen. Luella Mae Beeler was Judy Mullen's great-grandmother. She lived in Washington, Iowa. This quilt was made for Judy's mother, Dorothy Mae Miller, in the late 20s or early 30s. Dorothy's father made a black walnut full-size 4-poster bed for her. The quilt is a coverlet size for that bed. This quilt was given to Judy many years ago with deep set fold lines. She put it on a full guest bed and then layered quilts on top of it. Slowly the fold lines disappeared. Judy's mother remembered sitting under her grandmother's quilt frame when she went to visit. Her job was to thread the needles. The center applique flower arrangement appears to be in the shape of a C. Judy's daughter Cindy will someday own it. Oh, Cindy, you're here. So just a little bit more to say about it. The needle turn applique has tiny stitches. The stems and flower centers are embroidered. The quilts are beautiful, but the stories are so sweet. This is one of mine. It's called Blessings. In 2000, I had the best job in the world. I was music director over at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Tracy and supported the church in school and music. This quilt hung in my office and has words from a children's song. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small. All things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. The quilt has all my favorite things: piecing, applique, embroidery, and sweet words. This is Garden City Gateways by Joanne Adams. The pattern for this quilt was purchased by Joanne and 3 friends from a 2002 quilt show in Texas. They rotated each block, and Joanne added extra borders. She wanted to quilt it cross-hatch, diagonally. That would have been like from one corner to the other corner, like a big diagonal. Her husband worked with her to draw the lines for the quilting, but she said they had an awful time getting the line straight because the lead would become thick or the ruler would move. So then she washed the top to get the lines out, and she was horrified when one block bled. So she took it out and she redid the block. Later at a quilt show, she saw a quilt where the blocks were divided with sashing. Those are those little, yeah, right there, that's a sashing. So that's what Joanne did, and then she found she could quilt each block differently, making it much easier to mark. This is Merry, Merry Snowman by Sharon Borstad. If you know Sharon, she loves red, everything red. This fun, whimsical quilt is from Bunny Hill Designs. Sharon used the quilt as you go method, a technique, the way to quilt the blocks before putting the blocks together, before the quilt together. It simplifies quilting because it's an easy way to join the quilted pieces by machine. Instead of handling bulky quilts, you can quilt your project one block at a time. Each block was machine appliqued and attached with beige strips and borders. And the ladies are going to show you, she has a beautiful pillow to go with this quilt. It's so cute with the quilt. She puts this out at the holidays. This pillow is available, a pattern, at anniescatalog.com. It was so cute when I saw it. I thought, oh, I've got to make one just like it. I want that pattern. Oh, the bags. You know, it's really sweet. A surprise, actually, to put that. We call it back art. And Sharon had explained those were just some blocks from previous quilts that she had worked on. But so she has like a reversible quilt. $11. So Kathy is one of our helpers over here. Kathy, this is your submission. Applique tulips. The top was appliqued in 1935 by Kathy's great-grandmother, Cora Shreves, in 1935. Years later, her grandmother, Pluma, I've never heard that, it's very pretty, had it hand-quilted by a church group in Oakdale in 1968. She then put the binding on it. Later, the quilt fell into the hands of an uncle. He was a heavy smoker, and he stored it in a plastic bag when not using it as a bed for his dog. After he died, the quilt was washed and the colors bled into the white background. Kathy says, this is a good example of how not to treat a quilt. This is one of mine called Flower Garden. I affectionately call this my retirement quilt because I started making it and I thought I would get bored in retirement, but that hasn't happened. The pattern is by Australian quilt designer Kim McLean, and it uses K-facet fabrics. You can purchase a starter fabric kit for this pattern. They give you the pattern and a starter kit at a website called quiltageous.com. If you're interested, ask me and I'll show you. Along with other gorgeous patterns and kits. And it's all hand quilted. Busilla Applique by Joanne Adams. This was a quilt kit Joanne purchased for $25 from Manteca Quilter member Trudy Burns when she was moving. Trudy had started a little on one flower. It came in 3 pieces to be joined together. All the top flower and leaf materials were furnished. Joanne has the original box it came in, and on the outside is a price of $4.50. Oh, she wonders in what year it was purchased. Joanne doesn't remember the year she started, but it took over 2.5 years to finish. It's one of her favorites, and it hangs in her living room, displayed on a ladder. This is Dresden Flowers by Sharon Borstad, and Sharon says, I won this quilt. At the time, she lived in an RV resort in Palm Springs, and the Dresden plate blocks arrived in a brown paper bag. She and her quilting friends never were able to figure out who gave them the paper bag with the Dresden plates in it. They appear to be from 30s reproduction fabrics, so it's unknown exactly when they were completed. Her friend took the blocks home with her to Canada and made this beautiful quilt. It was auctioned off to raise money for Project Linus, which is an organization that provides handmade quilts for children in need. Sharon bought $20 in tickets, and they sold over $2,000 worth. She nearly died when she found out the winning ticket was hers, and her quilt group was thrilled that it went to one of their own. Another one of mine called Scenes of Summer. I love applique patterns from old quilt books. They're harder to find now, actually. So when I was making this quilt, I accidentally cut a hole in the block where I was making the geranium plant. So guess what? I just added another leaf. Who knew? You can't tell.
Now we know.
Now you know. And then I changed my mind on that squirrel that's climbing up the birdhouse right there. So on the back, I put the squirrel that I intended, I changed my mind, so I put him on the back, and he's holding my label. And it says, "First summer spent with my husband, Roger." Yay! And then I had displayed this, I think one of my earlier quilt shows in Manteca Quilt Show in 1998. It's on the back. There's a, whoever that year, it's at the top. Whoever that year they made cloth ribbons. And I thought it was so pretty, I had to put it on the back of my quilt. It won Viewer's Choice that year. This is titled Rose Wreath by Virginia Minette. For many years at the San Joaquin County Fair, Virginia's quilts and embroidery entries won ribbons. Points were added up for the most ribbons won, and the winner was presented with the coveted Golden Thimble Award. Virginia won it for 9 years straight. Wow. No one else ever won it, so they stopped giving out the award. This rose wreath pattern is from Quilt Presents Quick Quilts, and it's from 1999. Machine applique and hand quilted. Exhibited in the San Joaquin County and Alameda County fairs. Virginia has made and donated kids' quilts to the Child Advocacy Center located in French Camp for 20 years. So far, she has made 1,430 quilts, and she's still going strong. This is titled Sleigh Bells, one that I love. It's very folk art. I love folk art patterns. The designer is called Jan Paddock, P-A-T-E-K. All of her patterns just make you smile. They're a little bit whimsical. I sent it to a machine quilter, and I love how she put, it's like wind that just blows all the way across the quilt. This is Woodland Quilts, a Woodlands quilt by Joanne Adams. She and her husband moved to Manteca in 1983. She belonged to a small quilt guild in Fremont and continued going once a month. She's not sure when this was started. The original note she had was in a 1982 calendar that she kept while appliquing. She changed a few of the blocks to her own liking. Owl, frog, dragonfly, oak leaves, and acorns remind her of their cabin in Pioneer, California. When she finished the top, she put it together to hand quilt it, and it hangs in her family room every fall. And this is one of mine, friendship butterflies. So in Tracy, I have a very sweet, special group of quilters I get together once a week with, and we did a block exchange. That's where you figure out how many friends want to be involved in it, and you say, okay, when it's my turn on my month, I'd like everyone to make me a butterfly block, which they did. They signed it, and then when the person gets it back, they get to sew it together however they want and make a finished quilt. I loved the outer border. I made intentionally a big wide border where I could put feathers, and I like the scallop edge. It's right there on the bottom. So it was made by a sweet lady in our guild. But she pulled pieces from her stash of old fabric, and when I went to wash the quilt, because I wanted to get all my marking lines out, the color ran from fuzzy black corduroy that she had used. It was like, oh, I was horrified, and I said some very unkind things at the time. But I took a toothbrush, and I took some mild detergent, and I was able to scrub away just places randomly all over where it had bled. And then discreetly, I cut away her little pieces of corduroy, and I put another fabric in its place. So I don't think she ever could tell. Thank you. You are in for a treat today. This is called Les Sirens, which is French for mermaids. It is a 300-year-old traditional Cook Islands design. It was hand appliqued while living in Tahiti. This is a submission by Deidre McElroy. Her nanny, Taisho, shared all of her patterns with her that had been passed down through the generations because younger generations there on the island weren't interested. So the type of design is called tifefe. They are designed to be 4-fold cutouts, where you may have seen Hawaiian quilts. Those are traditionally 8-fold cutouts. Tahitian tifefe are never quilted, just hemmed and used. Well, that would be traditional, because this is quilted, isn't it, Kathy?
Yeah.
It is important to remember that mermaids throughout historical lore were not the sweet creatures Disney portrays. They were creatures with incomparable beauty that lured sailors with their voices to crash ships on reefs, hence the jagged rocks. Now, can you find the mermaid? Find her tail, and you can kind of, find her tail, Kathy, and then with your hand, go on up. Find her, there's her little eye. See her eye right there? And it's kind of a reverse image. You have to look real close to find, yeah.
Is this reverse applique?
Yes,
Okay.
or cutaway work, yes.
Looks like there's a whale under the mermaid.
It does, but it just, it's really amazing. So the back of the quilt with the fish design was done by Roxanne McElroy. She was the first to have reversible quilts in competition. She felt like she got to have all the fun of making 2 applique tops and only 1 quilt. This quilt won multiple awards across the country for handwork and viewer's choice. Over here, behind Deb, is this is a raw edge applique quilt by Sandra Newcomb. Sandra found this pattern in an old quilt book and she used raw edge because she said she would never get it done if she hand appliques, so she tried raw edge and it's just beautiful. You can get a little closer, just don't touch. If you want the ladies to show you anything on it, they can. The one in the center there is called Shades of Baltimore. I found that pattern. It originally called for a black background, but I kind of like the lighter color. Also, what I love to do is I enlarge my blocks. I don't like the pieces to be so tiny and tedious that called for an 8-inch block, but I blew it up to make an 11-inch block, just to make the pieces easier to work with. It stayed unfinished for a long time, and I just finished it last year. This one is called Jacqueline's Album Quilt. The designer is her name is Lori Smith. All of her folk art designs are wonderful. These applique blocks are 9 inches. My husband Roger says these are his colors, so it hangs in his office. And it's hand quilted. So are there any questions at all? Feel free to come up and I'll talk to you, answer questions. You can get close to here and see the hand stitching. And I hope you've enjoyed our bed turning today. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the show.